Hi, I'm Annette Marcus, and I'm welcoming you to AIB's It Tastes Jewish. And if you have any questions or would like to see the recipes, you could check out www.aibtv.com/It Tastes Jewish. Welcome to It Tastes Jewish. In today's episode, we are going to be preparing cabbage rolls. And cabbage rolls are actually pieces of steamed cabbage that have a wonderful flavored meatball inside, and it's baked into a rich tomato sauce. This recipe comes from my mom, who is a wonderful cook and has passed down this recipe to me and to my sister. And every time we make it, we always call her and say, "Are you sure it's only this much? Are you sure it's only that much?" Because she changes it every single time. So we're gonna start off, first of all, by preparing our sauce that the cabbage rolls are gonna cook in. And what we will do is we will take ketchup and we will take some water and make a nice thick sauce so these cabbage rolls can absorb all the wonderful flavor that comes with it. So I'm going to get a little bit of water. Okay, and then I'm going to stir the water and the ketchup together. Okay. Now the next thing that I'm going to add is a little bit of garlic powder. This is just to flavor the sauce. And a little bit of salt and pepper that I've combined together. And I'm going to also put in some lemon juice. And after I whisk this together, I'm going to add some brown sugar. And the brown sugar is going to give it that wonderful sweet taste that's going to have a contrast to the acid that's in the ketchup and the acid that's in the lemon juice. So to this mixture right here, I'm going to take a cabbage that has some of the outer leaves removed, and I'm going to take this core that you can see right here and just slowly cut around it and remove it. And this will make the cutting of the cabbage to add to the roaster a lot easier, because you're not going to have this tough piece to have to cut off of every single piece of cabbage. So I'm just going to cut down in some rough shapes like this. And you want to make this cabbage part bite size, because if you make it bite size and it's in your sauce, then when people are having the bite of the cabbage roll, they're going to have to be able to put all of this into their mouth. So you want it to be bite size so that each person doesn't have to swallow a huge amount of it at one time. And I'm going to throw this cabbage into the sauce that we've started. I'm going to mix it up a little bit. So all of the cabbage is surrounded by the juice. And then we're going to put it on the stove and let it start to cook for about, I would say close to maybe 20 or 30 minutes until it starts to boil. And then you'll be able to see that the texture of it will change just a little bit. It'll get a little bit richer and a little bit darker looking. Usually, roasters don't really fit onto your stovetop, so it's quite okay to do 2 burners. You have to adjust them just a little bit because one might cook a little faster than the other. but it's definitely available to work it this way. Inside, I've taken the cabbage leaves off of the cabbage. You can see that these are the outer leaves that you would ordinarily discard or perhaps maybe chop them up for your coleslaw. But these leaves right here have been placed in the steamer, and they've been in the steamer for about 20 minutes or so until they're very nice and pliable. And when you put your meat inside the cabbage roll, these are going to roll up like a little package, just like if it were a paper that you were preparing for a gift. So each piece is very nice and malleable and very soft. So depending if you have a steamer or not, you can just steam them. If you don't have a steamer, you can just drop them into boiling water. And another option is to take the whole entire cabbage and put it into the freezer overnight or for a couple of days. And then you can let the cabbage thaw on your cabinet, and then you can pull the leaves apart and they'll be just as pliable as this. That was the texture of this particular cabbage that I cut up for this sauce. So the first thing we're going to do is to take our ground beef. This is ground chuck. And to that, I'm going to be adding some rice, and that's going to help to bind the meat. And it's going to also add some moisture to the meat because it's going to bake and puff up as we are moving through the process. I'm going to also break this egg and put it into the mixture. And I'm going to add a little bit of seasoning salt, Lowry's seasoning salt. It has a nice mixture and blend of different spices, so it's quite nice in your meat. And then we have a little bit of garlic powder. You can start to hear that your sauce is boiling a little bit, which is really nice. And then we'll add some salt and pepper and a little bit of ketchup. When you're blending all of these items together, you want to be really careful that you don't over blend, because when you push the meat together really hard, what it does is solidify the fibers together and the fat together, and it won't expand and get puffy. So you don't want to eat like a great big hard meatball inside of your rolled cabbage. You want it to be very nice and light. So basically what I'm doing is I'm picking the meat up from the bottom, and I'm lifting it and just scrunching it a little bit at a time. And it may take a little bit more time to do this, but it's worth it because the texture of your meat is going to be nice and soft. Okay, so now that I have this meat all mixed together, I'm going to divide it up into sections before I start to roll them into the cabbage. So this should make about 9 meatballs. So I'm going to just start by pressing them together and see approximately how many I get. I can always add more or less. And again, you don't want to push them together really hard, because all you're going to be doing is toughening the ingredients. So you just want to go very, very lightly when you're working with your meat. And you can make these also in little tiny mini meatballs if you wanted to. And you would be able just to pop them into the sauce and cook them like that. And you could serve them for an hors d'oeuvre with a toothpick. Or if you don't like cabbage rolled around your meat, you can just cook them, all of these large balls, in the sauce as well. And then this way you'll have the flavor of the cabbage and the sweet and sour without the extra cabbage around the edge. Okay, now that I have my 9 meatballs, I'm going to just clean my cabinet up a little bit, because I think it's always important when you have raw meat around to make sure that you clean up very carefully. Okay, now I'm going to get a little knife, and each piece of the cabbage needs to have this outer skin vein removed. So you're going to just take your knife and slowly move your way down to the edge. Starting in the middle, you can see where there's no vein particularly with any texture. But once it starts to get a little bit lumpy, then you just hold the knife in your hand along with the cabbage leaf and cut all the way down so that each piece is nice and smooth. Again, it's that texture in your mouth that you really don't want to have. You don't really want to have that large piece of cabbage that's tough. Now the other thing that we're going to do is to just take the little bit of edge that where the leaf attaches to the core and just cut it off so that it's a little bit more even. This one seems like it's already ready. Just a little piece of that core at the end to make it a lot easier for rolling and also for tasting. Okay. There we go. Okay, now I'm gonna take my cabbage leaf and I'm gonna take one of the balls and I'm gonna lay it right down toward the end of the core, and I'm just gonna pat it down a little bit so that the shape is a little bit the same as the cabbage ball. And you can roll it up like this. Depending on your leaf, you'll know whether you're gonna roll it that way to start with. And once you do, you just turn it and make sure that the entire piece is covered. And you can see there's a seam right here. So this seam that you've used to close it, you just push it down a little bit and then place your cabbage roll right into your sauce. And you do it very gently, and then the seam will stay closed the entire time. The bigger the cabbage leaves that you have to work with, the easier it is. Okay. All right, now I'm gonna wash my hands off and then I'm gonna move those balls around just a little bit. And just let the sauce cover the top of each one of them. You can spoon up a little bit of sauce on the top, and because of the brown sugar, these are gonna get really, really golden brown. And then halfway through, in about 40 minutes or so, you can take your wooden spoon and turn these over, and by that time, your cabbage will have solidified with the meat and it will not come out of the roll. And even if it does, it's okay because you still have the delicious cabbage and the delicious meat. So I'm gonna get this into the oven. I'm gonna put it on at 350 for 1.5 hours. And if you have time, you can definitely preheat your oven ahead of time. I will show you some cabbage rolls that I have prepared ahead of time. Okay, and you can see how golden brown each one of these has gotten. And you can see the sauce is nice and thick. Now, if you make this the day before, you can put it into your refrigerator, and the grease, which is only gonna be a little bit, will be very bright orange. And you would take your spatula and just lift that grease off and discard it. It's very minimal amount, especially if you use the ground chuck. And each one of these you see is pretty much still wrapped in its little container. So we're gonna get a plate and we're gonna serve them up. And this is a wonderful meal to have anytime you wanna be a little bit fancier than just meatballs. Your meat's gonna be really nice and tender, and the cabbage is gonna be totally cooked through. And the sauce is going to be flavored all throughout. Really good. I hope you make cabbage rolls often and enjoy them. Okay, now we're gonna be making some wonderful barbecued beef brisket. Everybody loves brisket. You can have brisket sliced, you can have it pulled, you can have it chopped, you can have it in big chunks if you want to. But the key to brisket is cutting it against the grain. So after we prepare our brisket, I'm going to show you exactly how to cut it so that you never have anybody saying, this is too tough. Another secret about brisket is making sure that you cook it long enough. And you have to be around to cook it. For example, it may take about 3.5 to almost 4 hours to really cook a brisket through. It takes a lot of time, but I'm going to show you a method that is going to minimize the amount of time that you have to cook it and watch it. So you can put it into the oven and leave it there and not check it again for several hours, and then you will be able to keep the moisture inside and all of the gravy inside of the package instead of falling all over your pan. Now I'm gonna get this cooking bag. So I've turned back the edges so they're nice and even. And then I'm gonna take some cooking spray that has flour in it. And I'm going to spray the inside of this bag so that the fat, as it cooks and caramelizes, doesn't stick to the bag. This is a 5-pound brisket or a little bit more, so it's a very, very nice size. If you're gonna bother to make the brisket, you might as well get a big one because number one, it shrinks, and number two, the amount of time that it takes to cook it is so long that you might as well get the most you possibly can. Okay, so now I'm going to take the brisket bag and mold it up from the fold. And then I'm going to take a package of onion soup mix and I'm going to sprinkle it on the top of the brisket. I'm going to raise the top of it so that I make sure that I get all of the areas. And this is going to supply a little bit of moisture and a lot of flavor into your meat. You really don't have to flavor it any more than this. You could add onions or you could add carrots inside the bag if you wanted to. You could add celery or potatoes inside the bag, but I prefer to do it this way because I think that the grease that forms around the brisket is better taken off at the end, and then you can always boil your potatoes or celery or carrots in your natural gravy after you've taken the fat off. So I'm going to grab a hold of this bag and I'm going to come pretty close to where the brisket stops. And this bag is large, so I'm going to take this tie that I've been given inside the bag and I'm going to pull it really, really, really tight. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut off this extra piece right here because it's going to help me to wrap the brisket in foil much more efficiently. Okay, now I've taken a pan approximately the size of the brisket. And this is an important part because if you put this in a bigger pan, the heat is just gonna go all over the place. But if you put your brisket inside a pan that's about the right size, you have the heat from all 4 sides playing onto your meat and cooking it evenly and efficiently. So then I'm going to take a knife and I'm going to make 6 little slits into this bag. And I'm going to do it on the top because if I do it on the bottom, then all the gravy is going to fall to the bottom of your pan. So you just want to make 6 little tiny, tiny slits, and these slits are going to let the air come out of your meat and make sure that the bag doesn't explode. This is a very important part. And I'm going to try to do it in 6 different places that are around the entire top. And then I'm going to take some more foil. And I'm actually just going to wrap the whole entire pan into the foil. I think I'll turn it around this way. And I'm going to make a big package out of it. And this way, all of your aromas are going to stay inside your pan, and you could be cooking this all day in your house, and you probably won't have a brisket smell over the entire house. You'll just have it nicely contained in this pan. because the longer you cook meat with gravy in it, it's going to evaporate. So that's why you cook it inside the bag so it stays there, and that's why you cover the bag so that it doesn't disappear. So I'm gonna put this in a preheated oven at 350 for almost 4 hours, and then I'm gonna check it. And there's no reason to check it before then because it's not gonna be done. Okay, now we're gonna take our package of brisket and place it into the oven, and we're not gonna peek at it again for at least 3.5 hours. I'm gonna put it in the middle rack at 350, all closed up, and I'm gonna pretend that there's nothing there. Okay, now I'm gonna make a sauce to go on your brisket. There are myriad of wonderful sauces that you could use to put on your brisket. You could use a sweet sauce. Some people like to saute onions with some ketchup and let it cook on the stove a little bit like we made the cabbage rolls. Some people just like to have the natural gravy. But today I'm gonna be making a homemade barbecue sauce that's got some molasses in it and brown sugar. So it's gonna be a little bit sweet, but then I'm gonna put in some Maldon smoked sea salt. Okay, so first I'm gonna add my ketchup. And the brown sugar. And the red wine vinegar. And a little bit of molasses. And a drop of Worcestershire sauce. And I'm gonna stir that together. And then I'm gonna add just a little bit of grilled seasoning. And this is a fun little spice that you can buy. This is from Whole Foods, and you just use a little bit at a time. You can definitely put it on your meat or fish when you're grilling, but it also has a lot of spices in it, and you can be adding it to a lot of different sauces. And this is vegetarian. And then I'm gonna put a pinch of this smoked paprika in, and a good healthy portion of my sriracha sauce. Okay, and then I'm gonna get this sea salt that's smoked. And they're wonderful crystals that you can see have a lot of texture to it. So you're just gonna take a couple of pieces and you're gonna crunch it together and sprinkle it into your sauce. Okay, now I'm gonna whir this together and put it onto the stovetop for a few minutes while I am preparing the cutting of the brisket. I have in this oven a prepared brisket already so that you can see how to remove it from the package and also what to do with the wonderful gravy that's going to be coming up. Okay, as soon as you start to lift the foil out, you're gonna smell wonderful, wonderful things. And here is our package, and you can see that nothing spilled out. So I'm trying to find a corner that looks like it's ready to go, and this one right here does. So I'm just gonna take a tiny little snip. Not all the way, of course, because you don't want it to, you don't want to drop that little piece into your bowl. And here comes the gravy, perfectly into the bowl without wasting a drop. And this is a lot of gravy for this piece of meat. So then what we will do after that is to take this gravy and we're gonna pour it into another bowl and get the little pieces of maybe fat or whatever that accumulated. And then I'm gonna put the gravy into the refrigerator so that any fat that did accumulate will come to the top. And these are the little pieces of onion that were part of our flavoring that we really don't need. So I'm gonna pour this back into here and then put it into the fridge. Okay. Now we're going to take the brisket out of the bag and we're going to slice it. And I'm going to show you a very easy way to slice brisket and not make a mistake. And if you just take your knife and just get it close to where the meat is, right up above the fat, and just move your knife very slowly right across the top, this piece of fat, which is on all the briskets, will come right off. And then you have to go back again and do the edges. And you always want to make sure that you get this brown fat off. First, I'm going to cut the brisket in half with the grain. And then I'm going to move this over to the side and turn it around so that the grain is going this way and I'm going to cut this way. So you're just going to cut a little bit down on the diagonal. And you can cut the brisket as thick or as thin as you like. And I think cutting it about maybe 1/4 inch is good. People can always take as many pieces as they want, but a very large piece of brisket doesn't really have as much flavor as a piece that's cut a little bit thinner. Then you can take your knife and just lift it right through the meat and place it all in a really nice fashion so that it looks attractive. And it looks like you really took the time to cut it. Now I'm going to get the gravy. This is an example of what will happen when your fat rises to the top. And this is an example of what it will look like after you take the fat off. So you just want to take a spoon and you want to very slowly move the fat off and discard it into a bowl, and then you'll be left with all of your lovely natural gravy. So we're going to take this right here, take a couple of spoons, put it into our sauce, and I'm going to mix it together and pour it over my brisket. And if you want to make this earlier in the day, you can do it just like this and then reheat it in the microwave or in the oven covered with silver foil. I like to take my knife and just make sure that each of the pieces receive the sauce. Just open up the pieces a little bit and let the sauce fall in to the meat. Then I'm going to scatter a little bit of scallions on it and we're ready to serve. So brisket may seem like it's difficult to make, but it's really not, because now you know how to cook it so that all the gravy stays. You know how to slice it so it's not tough, and you have a beautiful sauce to go with it. So just remember, serve this on Shabbat because it tastes Jewish.